All right, I would say let's go ahead and kick things off. I'm sure we'll have additional participants join in the next few minutes, but that's completely fine. We can still go ahead and kick off. And I want to extend a warm welcome to everybody to today's webinar, The Growth Blueprint for Smart and Innovative Economies. I want to extend a welcome to all our speakers and to our participants. In a time of accelerating technological change, climate pressures, and shifting societal demands, the concept of a smart or an innovative economy is no longer just a buzzword, but it's a necessary blueprint for action. But how do places actually move from ambition to delivery? And what does it truly take to create an innovation ecosystem that is inclusive, resilient, and economically viable? And this is both a question and also an opportunity, and in some cases a dilemma that we're going to be exploring today. I'm Naomi Milstein, and I'll be your host for today. I'm part of BABLE's UKI team with a background in climate and in economic development. So in today's session, BABLE, together from experts from Germany, the Netherlands, and from Northern Ireland, we're going to explore how public sector ambition, private sector agility, academic insight, and community energy can come together to address real-world challenges. We'll examine the innovation ecosystem as a dynamic, as a collaborative environment, and aim to inspire new thinking for building smarter, more sustainable economies. A quick word from BABLE for those of you who aren't familiar with this yet. We are the accelerator for smart cities in Europe, and we bring together experts from across the continent with the aim of helping places transition to smarter and more sustainable futures. BABLE is headquartered in Germany, but we're widely present across the continent, and this allows us to bring a deep level of European expertise and knowledge to tackling smart city challenges and opportunities. I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today. We have a panel of speakers today with very interesting and relevant backgrounds, and I wanted to say to them again, thank you for bringing your expertise and for joining us today. Our first speaker today is Deirdre Ferguson from Belfast. Deirdre has built a diverse career across the private, public, and community sectors with a strong focus on training, community development, and urban innovation. And she is now a city innovation broker with Belfast City Council, where she leads smart city projects that support urban innovation and resilience through the Smart Belfast framework. Her work supports the delivery of the city's long-term strategy, the Belfast Agenda, through the development of an advanced urban services and the creation of the Smart Belfast framework. Our second speaker today is Thomas Scheuerle. Thomas is the CEO of Baden Campus, which is a leading startup and innovation platform based in Baden in the southwest of Germany. And under his leadership, Baden Campus has grown into a dynamic ecosystem that connects over 100 partners across industry, academia, and municipalities. He brings a unique mix of entrepreneurial leadership and public-private collaboration to the innovation landscape, and he has made Baden Campus into a hub for future-oriented solutions and cross-sectoral transformation. Our last speaker for today is BABLE's own Peter Portine. Peter is a smart city strategist and public-private innovation expert at BABLE. He connects regions, governments, and stakeholders to build ecosystems that enable sustainable socioeconomic growth. He supports cities and regions across Europe and Asia in designing and delivering smart development strategies through triple helix collaboration, including founding the Brainport Health and Innovation and Smart District, which is, of course, the topic of today's presentation. In addition to our speakers for today, we're going to be joined towards the end of our webinar by Harris Piplas from Dries and Sommer in Zurich, and Harris is going to deliver an additional commentary based on his own experiences in urban development and regeneration. And so what we want to do today is to inspire you, not just with engaging narratives, but to give you concrete actions and tools that you can take to jumpstart your innovation economy. And before handing the torch over to our speakers, I want to give you an introduction on the topic and to take a little bit into a deep dive. And so today we're unpacking what it really takes to build an innovation ecosystem that is inclusive, that's impactful, and that's future fit. We all know we're living in a constant state of disruption with all sorts of converging issues and trends, climate change, the advent of AI, digital transformation. Just taking a quick glance at some statistics here, the vast majority of us EU citizens live in urban areas, but actually only less than 10% of urban areas in the EU are considered to be digitally mature. We all understand, of course, that having an innovation ecosystem can increase local economic prospects when it's well integrated. And as a response, or in response to this, cities and regions need to future-proof their economies by becoming actual innovation systems. And so this brings us to really what's the core challenge today. Bridging ambition with action. Most cities have an innovation strategy, but few have a working innovation ecosystem. And so the issue isn't a lack of ideas, it's things such as execution, coordination, and inclusion. Many cities have smart strategies, but they often get stuck, for example, in things such as pilot traps, fragmented partnerships, and inflexible procurement. And the Valley of Death is a model that shows us what happens to innovation projects that can't move beyond the pilot stage. And so what this is really showing us is the real challenge that smart cities and regions face. It's not really about the generation of innovation, but rather the systemic ability to adopt and sustain it. So what is the Valley of Death? It's the stage after a pilot or a proof of concept, but it's before a solution is mature enough to actually to attract sustained funding, to be adopted, or to scaled. And this is where so much promising innovation, unfortunately, fails here. And it's not due to any kind of technical flaws, but it's rather due to structural and institutional barriers. So the Valley of Death, it's not a failure of technology, but it's a governance failure. And overcoming it is going to require cities to think like system integrators and not just project managers. And so I want to have us take a look at a slightly different model. And looking at our top level, again, this is just where we left off, surface success. This is where so many projects start, and unfortunately, they often end. And this is what we tend to read about in newspaper headlines. And so this kind of surface level project creates an illusion without really changing anything fundamental. The middle layer is where we want to get us to. This is where innovation begins to stick. This is where it moves from exception to norm, and this is where it becomes embedded in institutional routines. This requires, however, buy-in, cross-departmental collaboration, and policy alignment. Our base layer is, of course, the goal, and this is where we want to get to. And this is where resilience, equity, and legitimacy happen. And this is where innovation is used to meet societal transitions and climate and inclusion. Few cities get here, but those who do manage to are using innovation to reshape outcomes. So a final message that I want to leave with you today before handing over to our speakers is, what does success look like? Success, it isn't just GDP, it's resilience, it's inclusion, and it's trust, and smart economies who are creating value with and for their people. We know that the ground is shifting beneath the ecosystem. We've got tensions, we've got opportunities, we've got structural shifts, we've got tensions between things like speed and trust, between experimentation versus regulation, between economic growth and environmental sustainability. And what we're looking for is transformations within the innovation ecosystem itself. So a final question or food for thought that I want to leave you with before handing over to our first speaker is, what would it take for your city or region to become an engine of innovation, not just for growth, but for solving real problems? And I think participants today, keep this message in your mind. It may be that you already have the answer to this today, and it may be that at the end of the webinar that you have got a slightly different answer. And with that, I am happy to kickstart things off today with our first speaker from Belfast. Deirdre, over to you.
Thank you. I'll see if I can take control of the slides now. So thank you very much for the introduction. I'm really delighted to be here to be part of today's webinar. And I've got a challenge of giving you an overview in 10 minutes of the work that we've been doing in Belfast to create a thriving innovation ecosystem to support our city's challenges. But before I go into the detail, I think it's really important to set the context of our city for you. Some of you may be aware that Belfast is the capital of the north of Ireland, and we are the second largest city on the island of Ireland. And within the city region, we have just over 1 million people as a population, but we are relatively a small city with just under 350,000 people living in the urban core. We have a very unique position in that we have excellent dual market trading relationships with both the EU and the UK. And we have the second fastest growing knowledge economy in the UK. And that's largely due to the excellent work of our universities and our growing innovation ecosystem, which is really focused in Northern Ireland on key sectors around health and life sciences, cybersecurity, software development, creative industries, and advanced manufacturing. And while we recognise these strengths in our city, we also have many city challenges. And these are the things that keep our city leaders awake at night. And these are the challenges that we hope to contribute to and resolve through innovation. We have 8 out of the 10 most deprived wards in Northern Ireland. In Belfast, the life expectancy gap between our more affluent areas and our more deprived areas is significantly growing. We have a growing ageing population with housing stress, and we have a very serious problem in terms of the legacy of the period of conflict that we've had here in Northern Ireland, and those issues continue. We have major health and educational inequalities and high levels of economic activity, whereby people of our working age in Northern Ireland aren't actually looking for work, and they are just out of employment entirely.
Looks good.
So obviously, to address these challenges, like all cities, we have our city strategy. And in Belfast, that's called our Belfast Agenda. And through that agenda, we have a collaborative leadership agreement across the city with key anchor institutions, our communities and stakeholders to achieve our ambitions for 2035. And they're very much around reimagining our city to make it a more attractive place for people to live in, to work in, to invest in. And we obviously then want to grow our population in our city centre. And to do that, it is about achieving solutions to the challenges that I've highlighted that create tensions for growing a resilient, sustainable city of the future. And in steering Belfast towards a more resilient and sustainable future, our city leaders have recognised that it's really important for them to consider the impact of digital innovation and how this is impacting on the creation and delivery of our services. And that involves creating new solutions, which really need to be innovative because they challenge the ways that we've done things before. And so in 2017, the Belfast City Council established our City Innovation Office, and they challenged us to develop a smart Belfast programme that would actually help to create an innovation ecosystem to help our city leaders, our city partners, and our communities understand how best to harness data, science, and emerging technologies to support our city's ambitions, to help address our economic, social, and environmental challenges, and to help us build resilience to digital disruption. And so since then, we have brought in significant amounts of funding to encourage collaboration across our city. And this has enabled our stakeholders to step out of their comfort zones, to trial new technologies, to push boundaries in relation to adopting technologies, to sharing data, to opening data to stimulate innovation. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of the types of projects that we have been running. These particular projects have come to us in different ways. Like many cities, we suffer from congestion in Belfast city centre. And we want to encourage people to move to a more walkable city, to encourage them to cycle. And we had an approach from a local company who were developing a sensor for bikes. And they asked us, could we help them develop a test bed to test and trial their solution? And to do that, we brought a collaboration together of public, private sector and our communities and our citizens in the city who used our public bikes. And each of the partners brought something to the table, whether it was resources or funding. We developed our plan. We had a common challenge that we had in mind, common objectives that we wanted to achieve. And our citizens became involved as citizen scientists, trialing these sensors on their bikes and gathering data anonymously. And then this allowed us to crowdsource data and build a sophisticated picture of the daily cycling habits of our city's growing cycling community. And this informed our future paths for cycling in the city, making cycling more fun and attractive and a safer way to travel around the city. Another example is our healthy aging test bed. Very much after COVID, we understood that our communities were suffering from isolation and loneliness, particularly those who were elderly. And again, our communities approached us with this challenge and asked if we could help. So again, we brought a collaboration of key players together. And in this case, it was our Department of Health, our local academics, and our community sector. And together we formulated the challenge based on the needs of our elderly population, and we found funding to source a challenge call which invited our innovators to work with our residents to innovate around the challenges of isolation and loneliness. And again, this produced really exciting results where our communities were being brought into the innovation ecosystem and understanding the vital role that they could play to shape and influence policy. So through these types of projects, we understood that there was a model forming, and I know many of you would have seen this model in terms of quadruple helix. But for us, what was really, really important was the fact that this was more around collaboration around an innovation helix. And for us, we had understood from the previous many projects that we delivered that we really needed to start putting citizens at the heart of that collaborative innovation helix, that we need to build capacity for our citizens to inform the innovation agenda and to really engage in the innovation economy, and that they need to shape where public sector is putting its efforts in terms of policy formulation and targeting investment. And again, this needs to have a pull through into the research that our universities are carrying out, which needs to have a stronger focus on place-based innovation and indeed translational research. So that in turn can inform public policy and help us to provide better services for our communities. And what we need to do is bring into all of this helix collaborative working is that information from translational research really gets into the heart of the work of our innovation-driven enterprises. So they have access to the research from our research bodies, and that they have access to real-world test beds that again bring our citizens into the loop. So the learning from all of our projects has been that we really need to focus and strengthen this collaborative helix. And to do that, we have identified a number of key pillars that we have introduced into this quadruple helix working methodology within the city. And very much this is focused on collaborative leadership. And some of these you won't be surprised to hear. And we're developing these through the projects and our strategies as we go forward. And collaborative leadership, I'll talk a bit more on, is something that is really important to make sure that we strengthen this across all of those elements of the helix that I've just mentioned. It's really important for us to have shared urban challenges that have a focus on the citizen at the heart, and that we drive a vibrant innovation economy that brings our innovative SMEs into the conversation and to enable them to really stimulate innovation through providing data to them, opening data, and having novel finance models. And you've mentioned procurement as well, looking at how we innovate around our procurement and adoption methodologies in the city and invest in our technology and data infrastructure. And through these 8 pillars, placemaking, while it's last on our list, it's not necessarily least. For us, it's really important that we have a whole place approach in Belfast, because we need to recognise our unique characteristics, both historical and geographical, and the role that they play in supporting our innovation ambitions. And what we have been doing is iteratively learning how we develop our innovation ecosystem. And we have brought together a very unique combination of players in our city of anchor institutions who are now known as Innovation City Belfast. And it is through this unique partnership of anchor institutions that we're developing those 8 pillars to be able to strengthen our collaborative innovation helix. We've got Belfast City Council, Belfast Harbour, which is one of our largest landowners in the city, whose land is made available for testing and trialling new solutions. We have Belfast Metropolitan College and our 2 universities who provide skills development. And we've Catalyst and Invest Northern Ireland, who also provide startup incubator support and investment for our companies. And together, these key players have ambitions to really grow the innovation landscape of Belfast and to put it on the map. And core to that is about inclusive innovation and economic growth. So this grouping has got responsibility for delivering £120 million investment in digital investments in the next 10 years. And that comes from the Belfast Region City deal. And through that, we have shaped what that will deliver, which will be £40 million for digital infrastructure. We have venture funds to stimulate innovation for our SMEs. And we have £34 million that we're allocating to innovation for societal impact. And while we have these major investments and we have now this collaborative leadership group in the city to help drive forward our innovation ecosystem, we realise that innovation-led economies, while they offer significant advantages and benefits, they can inadvertently create inequalities and barriers for individuals and communities. So this group is very much focusing on how we can address that inclusion challenge and looking at measures for inclusion in terms of all of these investments going forward. So some of the key tasks for this group to lead on for our city going forward are continuing that work of harnessing new and emerging technologies to address our urban challenges, accelerating adoption of artificial intelligence and bringing funding in to do that, maximising the impact of investment on our city centres of excellence, which look at research across advanced manufacturing to creative industries, clinical trials and digital health. And also to make sure, as I've mentioned, that we can embed inclusive impact of city deal investments and all other investments that come into the city, which is a major challenge. Another challenge for us going forward is really looking at how we unlock the data that our public sector holds to stimulate innovation and to look at new models for innovative procurement. So we're very keen to develop what we've been doing to date in these areas, but also to learn from others. And we're keen to work collaboratively with yourselves to see how we can take these challenges forward. We're very open to working with you on this. So on the last slide here, I've got my contact details and would love to hear from you if you would like to work with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. That is extremely interesting. And I think this is really just what you've done in Belfast is an amazing work. And I think what really stands out to me is what you yourself have said. This is a city that has faced a lot of challenges, including a recent history of the Troubles or a legacy of a not always so nice history. Often when we think of innovation ecosystems, we think Berlin or Amsterdam. But I think what you've really shown here is that this is possible in so many different kinds of contexts. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to pass the torch on to our next speaker. So we are now moving from Belfast to the southwestern corner of Germany, and over to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Naomi. So thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. And as you said, Naomi, I'm coming from a bit of a different angle, not from the city perspective, but actually from the perspective of a region, the Southern Upper Rhine region, which, and I will start similar, is at the southwest of Baden-Württemberg. Baden-Württemberg in Germany is one of the strongest innovation ecosystem actually worldwide. I mean, always depending on what you calculate or how you calculate, but we're the southwestern part of it. And we have about 10% of the inhabitants of Baden-Württemberg. And as you can also see, only 5.8% of the Baden-Württemberg economic total turnover. So compared to regions as Stuttgart, for example, the economy is a bit less strong. But on the other hand, Freiburg is actually the center city of our ecosystem. We have strong academic background, and then also in Ortenau-Offenburg region is a region which is actually economically strong. So it's an interesting combination. Baden Campus this was established in 2017. And what's important to know, because I think it tells a lot or gives a lot of important background about our story, is that we are a private company actually, but we are a spin-off of the local utility company, which is again in ownership of local municipalities. So we kind of have a private approach, but we are connected to an institution which is already kind of a binding institution between different municipalities, because we are obviously work across different cities, and as you all probably know, it tends to get political quite early on. So we had actually a sweet spot to kind of bypass all these political discussions and start building our ecosystem from a private angle. And now what happens at the moment is that we actually grow into all these more institutional discussions, but after we have established a certain platform for the region. So this is what we have done or achieved together so far. So what we do is a bit more in the area of technology transfer. So we do innovation and digitalization projects with companies. We run startup and accelerator programs. We mentor startups. We connect people, and we have actually built as we say it, a hub or a platform on the one hand with talents, with all local universities, also from the Swiss side, from Basel area, big biotech area, as well as from Strasbourg and Colmar and Mulhouse, French side, Alsace. So we do a lot of actually activities with these universities. On the one hand, we have built a European-wide ecosystem of, on the one hand, startup accelerators and venture capital players, but also just local associations from different industries to be kind of a platform. That's why we gave us the name, for all these organizations to connect, but not just remain in the role of a platform, also help with the actual implementation of innovation projects. For our model, it's also important to involve local industry. So you see some of the key industrial players here. Some of them might be familiar to you. So we actually connected all players that are relevant for innovation or for economic development in general on our platform. So from startups to industry to municipalities and to associations, capital providers, and build an engine on how these, and I will show that in a minute, build an engine on how all these different institutions can work together. Just to give you an idea on what is it that we are actually doing, because sometimes it's a bit abstract to talk on that ecosystem level. So it starts with hackathons, innovation gatherings, there are events, matchmaking events, there are a lot of just actual projects with AI or with startup scouting, where you help a corporate or a startup almost as a consulting company to implement certain things. And then on the right side, you see our startup activities. So there's a lot of startups from not just the Freiburg area, but actually from all over Germany by now who work with us to use our ecosystem to get partnerships in the main fields that we are acting in. And I think this specification of certain fields of activity that you want to focus on is one of the key ingredients to make such an ecosystem work. So I now focus a bit more on share some experiences on what we have learned so far on our journey. First thing is, okay, can't see the full slide here, but then I tell it orally. So what we started was building a shared vision for the region. And I also wrote there or derive, because the thing here is, okay, now it's coming. And what we did is we made it ambitious. It comes from a certain ecosystem observation, from also an analysis of what's happening in Germany, in Europe. But we said we want to be amongst the top players. The SC Freiburg Football Club is, let's say, in the top 5 of Germany and maybe in the top 40 or 50 of Europe. And that was kind of a benchmark for us. And we try to specify it a bit. We have a cyber physical kind of industries, so medtech or smart city are things we're doing. We have these 3 national locations where we are situated at, and then we don't have, as other ecosystems have, for example, you might know München or Heilbronn even, we don't have a big investor or big spender who builds the whole thing up, but we need to involve partners to grow piece by piece to be competitive. And Baden Campus, we understand ourselves as kind of a systemic player in this whole field, as the one who bridges all the different actors. And as I said in the beginning, I wrote derive because that wasn't the result of a joint discussion on how to develop a strategy, which would be far too complex for a region. There's a strategy of the city, there's a strategy of the university, there's a strategy of other actors that we try to also, together with them, obviously, we try to distill what are the key ingredients that everybody can agree to and build a shared vision on it. And Freiburg used to be the green city, so I didn't put topics in here. At the moment, we're working on a new narrative that might involve things like smart and healthy for the next phase. Next thing is, we didn't just build programs that stand next to each other, but we try to really integrate them in a platform which allows innovation journeys. So we have a community which is at the core of everything, where we involve all the stakeholders. Then we have the green columns you see. We have different kind of services for startups, for corporates, for co-creation, where you go together, resources like investment, money, and infrastructure. And we have them across our core areas, which are smart region, so mobility, the municipality topics, more or less. Then we have automation, so industrial topics, automation and robotics mainly. And we have healthcare as the 3 key topics of our area. And we provide all our services across those different domains. And we have built our team and our partnerships so that everything is linked. And that as a startup, you can start with a startup program, but then move into co-creation projects with municipalities or industrial players. Might get even investment from us or from our partners. And then on the other hand, we partner with the university hospital to provide test beds or living labs for testing a certain innovation strategy. So that's how things are supposed to work together. And that's why we also build our team. We just switched to build it from the green logic to the blue logic to account even more for the journeys that innovation teams are doing. A key strategy part we took was also that we built sub-brands so that we can take partners in. It's harder to get people involved to follow a Baden Campus program. Now, for example, in the health domain, we built one with the university, with the university hospital and the economic promotion agency on a certain topic, so everybody can put his or her logo, and we do this as a partnership to align things, but it's not under the, let's say, communication brand dominant brand of one of the entities, but it's a joint thing. So that's what we actually scaled into all our fields of activity to be able for partners to join. This here might be a bit generic, but you see here a group of 7, which we recently participated in the Bloomberg Harvard Cityship program, cross-sector networks, this team builds those networks, but we also, for example, developed the idea of a cross-sector trainee program to actually have talent moving across different sectors to build networks and to understand how public sector or university or private sector works. And then final slide, because to not take too much time, I think which is also a thing that works well for us is that Baden Campus actually is not a public institution that has a certain funding and is so we're very related to our success. If we don't manage to people to contribute to our platform, we won't remain in the long run. So this is actually, I think, a healthy thing because that forces us to continuously improve our services. And I actually like the way it's built. Obviously, as I said in the beginning, more and more of the stakeholders, shareholders from cities to economic promotion agencies, even to universities, think more into institutional connections. So that will also ensure our sustainability. But still, I think it's a good thing to actually have to earn your own money to improve your services. So thanks very much. I hope that was helpful, and I'm also happy to be able to be present for discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. This is a great example, and I think what really stood out to me here in your presentation is that what you've shown us is a leading example of how the private sector can really be at the helm of local and regional innovation. I think so often we look to the public sector, we look at government, we look at national and regional authorities and agencies, but I think what you've shown is that a fully private sector involvement can work, and they can really be a flag carrier for regional and local development. I see some questions in the chat, which is great, and we should have some time at the end of our presentations to do that, to answer those questions as well. So keep them coming. If you've got any questions for our speakers, feel free to put them into the chat. And that brings us to our final presentation today, and that is from Peter Portijn. And Peter, over to you.
Well, thank you, Naomi, and also a privilege listening to Deirdre and Thomas. A lot of what I hear resonates, and also you will recognize when I share some of our practices from BABLE all around the world. But just to refresh, we are the Public Sector Innovation Accelerator. So this is at the core of our main services. This is what we do day by day, both in Europe and in Asia. And to do it, we're focusing especially on the ecosystem part that sits in the economic growth area. We have a sector focus, but we also have an offering on the various roles that we can take and how we can support you in these endeavors, building and accelerating these ecosystems. And the good news is I remember very well Belfast, as we at the early days of the Belfast agenda had the privilege of also supporting Belfast, bringing in some inspiration and ideas. And I know that also the Brainport model was one of the examples that I presented at the team at the early start, and also my privilege to share a little more today. So we are in Europe, we are in Asia, so we have the perspective of different cultures, but all, let's say, challenging the same, having the same challenges, building these ecosystems that should help cities to grow socio and economically. And one of the first I want to quickly touch upon is in my backyard. In the background, you see the heart of Eindhoven, which you might know is the hometown of Philips. And Philips' legacy brought us a lot. We serve both continents, Europe and Asia. And as I mentioned, we had the privilege of working in Belfast with some inspiration from Brainport. So that is one of the examples that I wanted to share with you. Less than 100 years ago, the Eindhoven region was a rural textile cigar makers region with a very high unemployment. And that was one of the main reasons that by these days, Philips decided to build their first factories in Eindhoven. And as you noticed, on the recent years, Eindhoven has developed into, let's say, a high-tech semiconductor hubspot. And people always question how that happened in relatively short time. Well, I think there are a few main messages. The first one is that Eindhoven is small. We have almost 200,000 people, and another 100,000 in the surrounding communities and municipalities. So we learned the hard way that if we try to do anything in any economic sector, I always say we end up doing nothing, because if you want to compete on a global scale in the world, in these supply chains that stretch the world, you have to be smart, but you also have to be selective. So try to align and also align your resources and your money in some specific areas where you can excel and where you can also be successful. And that means some choices. The EU mentioned this, the smart specialization. And actually that helped to build on the legacy of Philips, eventually ending up with companies like ASML and NXP today. And that also brought Eindhoven, and today Eindhoven is mentioned the Brainport, because the Brainport is more than only the city. It's the city with its surrounding cities and municipalities. So the smaller towns around Eindhoven benefit to be part of this bigger region. And the Brainport region encompasses now approximately 21 cities. And starting as the first contributor to our GDP today, Eindhoven Brainport is at the second place. And if you follow the forecast, what AI and other technologies are driving in terms of growth in the high-tech sector, we anticipate that this knowledge industry in Eindhoven can easily become the biggest contributor. But that does not happen by coincidence, because part of our strategy, and also Deirdre mentioned it, the Belfast agenda, we have a Brainport navigator. So we also have a kind of integrated strategy for socio-economic growth. And part of one of the mechanisms that we used is that we have maybe a little complex model, how we look at our own ecosystem and how we day by day check if this still aligns with our ambitions, with the needs of all the actors in the whole in the region, so that we make sure that we neatly integrate all these different aspects and needs from the private side, from the academia, also from the public side. So they both align with our strategic agenda and our vision, but they also should be put in place, because if you are missing any of these elements, then the system will start to hamper and it will not deliver the value and also the impact that we're looking for. So this model has been leading, and we also from BABLE, we use this as one of our tools to do a kind of ecosystem mapping. If one of you would ask us to see what kind of support we could bring on the table, because this will actually bring you a kind of action program that directly identifies what are the specific actions we need to take, where do we have to make additions on our regional level, is it on the private side, should it come from public side? And as mentioned, the Helix approach is an integrated approach that brings all these interests together. So it's no longer the silos of government, the silo of the academia or the private businesses working alongside each other, but we're integrated in our ambition, and we're also integrated in the way we commit ourselves financially and on all of these programs. And the board, similar to what Deirdre mentioned in Belfast, is a board that consists of representatives of all these institutions. And they are basically responsible to putting these programs together and also renew them every 5 years. Well, and what worked in Eindhoven also apparently work in other parts of the world. So we went from Eindhoven, we go to Vietnam, a fully different economy, but also an economy that is fast growing. They have a need to transform their economy. They come from a background of, let's say, large scale, low value manufacturing. And basically, they were only in the agriculture at the late 90s. So in only 30 years, they made a rapid transition through standardized manufacturing, raising their income, but also now facing a gap to make the next step. So they are now moving towards a more research tech-based economy. And again, the city of Binzung, which is in the south, it's not the capital, it's one of the local provinces. They joined forces with Eindhoven in the early days. And again, we used the mechanism of a navigator or the agenda or let's say the common strategy to bring all these interests together and to get the kind of awareness among different stakeholders that they need to commit to a more integrated way of, let's say, aligning all your actions. And that also involves that we had to convince them that in a country that is very much, let's say, government-led on a central model, that you also have to, let's say, open up and also at the local level invite the private side and also the academia to join this and to make this a kind of common joint effort. And that means that you cannot just copy paste the Helix model. And I agree with Deirdre that in the next evolution, Also in Vietnam, it will probably have the notion of a multi-helix, or let's say the next generation. But for now, we were already very proud that we managed to get the awareness among Vietnamese leadership that they have to step away from their traditional way, how they manage the country, and start listening to your local, let's say, stakeholders. That also brought them some real impact. It helped them to actually accelerate, not only in a social and in a qualitative way, but also in a financial way, to accelerate and raise the impact in terms of attraction of FDI, which you are aware that FDI is still a very important driver for GDP growth in Asian countries. And in the next stage, obviously, it should also be based on your own R&D and IP development, but that's the next step to come. And we also help them not to tell this story around the world, because if you can raise your exposure, you can build a brand, you can also use this success to attract other investors, other type of industries that fit your future vision. And BABLE is also well positioned to help you, let's say, expand your brand, expand the focus, and also your international positioning in terms of placemaking and city marketing. So that is the kind of storytelling that we also bring on the table, that helps also smaller cities to raise their brand and to also to put their ambition out to be heard. And that kind of ambition is also sometimes combined with kind of national trade missions and other events that also help smaller cities to build a brand abroad and to also reach out to those that are, let's say, in need, and also make yourself known to the world. If you have this kind of ambitions, if you're building this ecosystem like Belfast did, they also participate in many international events, and that is a way to also, let's say, to reach beyond your limits. And that, I think, is Belfast a good example. I think Brainport is another one, that in a small country we can small things can have a great impact, and that also positions yourself more in the global supply chains where the investments are, let's say, distributed. And it's my pleasure to share this in a nutshell. We have different mechanisms and also standardized tooling to bring some basic assessment on the table. So we, in any aspect of this kind of projects, we would be privileged to see how we can be of support for that. And I think that is why I'll end my presentation for sake of time, and especially for all the questions that I see passing in the chat. Thank you, Naomi.
All right. As our final topic for today's webinar, we are very happy to welcome Dr. Harris Peplas from Dresden Sommer in Zurich, where he leads urban design and planning. Dresden Sommer is a very close collaborator of BABLE. We've been working closely together on a number of initiatives for several years now. Very happy to have you today, Harris, and I think it'll work best. You can just go ahead and prompt me to move to the next slide, and I will now go ahead and hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Naomi, and great presentations from Peter. Also great insights from Northern Ireland and also from Southwest Germany. And the discussion that we just had with Peter Griffith from BABLE in Dublin last week ended up in this short-term invitation to share a few insights, and I was very much inspired with what I heard before. Of course, very aware of Peter's especially work in Eindhoven, in Vietnam and beyond. So where we started discussing in Dublin was how much actually it's not the lack of innovators, startups, talented architects, economists in Europe, or even not lack of funding, why many projects, also innovation campy projects and projects that should trace the path for this innovation ecosystem, the spaces, the physical spaces that are necessary, they fail because of basically lack of holistic approaches. That's what this slide shows, and lack of stakeholder alignment. If you just click yourself to next, it's a interactive slide. If you'll be so kind, Naomi, you'll see exactly that we believe, as strategic partner of BABLE, that combining these competences, and we are the large organization with 7,000 employees, architects, designers, consultants, experts on AC, water, climate, energy, etc. Together with BABLE, we are able to support cities and other agencies in creating the spaces that are necessary to be innovative. And that's where very often aspects that you see on the right-hand side, the technical, rational, the funding, etc. With this, it's being played against the emotional, inspiring, atmospheric, the social inclusivity and sustainability that is very, for example, evident in the Brainport. It's not just a post-industrial transformation, it's a livable and place where people want to work. If you go to the next one, as we will see these difficult processes of curatorship, of transformation from a, let's say that's a collage from different cities, Mannheim, Sarajevo, Athens, Zurich, and these, as many of you work with stakeholders, it's far away from being romantic processes where people meet and sing around the fire and create the perfect and inclusive and innovative city. Difficult processes, their fears, there are also visions and confusions that happen on the way. That's why, again, most projects fail. I live in Switzerland. Despite the referenda that we have, it's very difficult to align stakeholders to work in the same direction. And in this sense, those are the images from processes where we jump in and co-create with the different stakeholders, public, private, academia, startups, and try to find a common solution and not see ourselves as authors, but as curators of the process. And finally, the last slide is a collage of different, I'd say, outcomes and visualizations that come out of these conversations, the City Action Labs, these, I'd say, necessity, which you see in the middle, that understanding the potentials and challenges of spaces in terms of open space, green space, ecology, mobility, building types, etc. It's something that we need to analyze together, and then to create what you see on the right and the left-hand side, to create these master plans for innovation ecosystem, for innovation campy, together again with the stakeholders and all the involved players. With that, I would just to close this short reflection and thank you for giving me the time, and looking forward to the discussion and future sessions with you.
Thank you so much, Harris, for rounding out our presentations today. I think you've provided us some really great contextual commentary for us at the end of all of our presentations. And of course, as often happens, we are a little bit tight on time, but nonetheless, we have 5 or 6 minutes remaining. And I did, of course, want to make sure, as promised, to give our audience the chance to answer some questions as well. I see that we already do have some in the chat. So I do have one question right now that is oriented towards our speakers. How can we best utilize the emerging technologies such as AI and IoT to contribute to the development of smart economies at the local level? And what challenges have you encountered in implementing this? How can this be better addressed? So happy to put that question to any one of our speakers. Feel free to just unmute yourself and to jump in.
I'm happy to come in there. So I suppose one of the roles in the City Innovation team in Belfast has been to expose our city leaders, our communities and our innovators to technologies and to give them the chance to play with them. So one of the examples is that we applied to be one of the UK 10 5G region centres, and we were successful in gaining £5 million to set up 5G test beds that will really allow various parties within the city to understand how 5G can be utilised within their various sectors. And that includes our transport sector, advanced manufacturing, our creative industries and our port. And together they are exploring what those opportunities are. And as part of that, they are announcing some challenge funds, so our local SMEs can also get involved in the process to understand and play around with 5G to address the challenges that each of those sectors are finding. So what we're doing is trying to look at what the challenges are in the city, look at funding, look at new and emerging technologies, and providing test beds so that our academia, our city leaders, and our innovators can play around with that new technology to understand its benefits, but also what the risks are so that we can mitigate against those and then put the right policies in place to support innovation going forward. And then in terms of the community side, we're really looking at, and we do lack funding in this area, and I'm not sure if any of our partners on the call experience the same, but when it comes to involving our communities, there is very little funding that would go directly to our communities to help build their capacity and understanding the potential of AI and new and emerging technologies. So we are really seeking to influence that and to make sure that the civic voice is heard in the creation of new funds going forward. So that in particular is a challenge for us. And it is always an upward challenge because you're trying to influence funders, you're trying to bring public sector on board, you're trying to create opportunities for our innovators to be able to test and trial in safe environments. So we need to also look at the policy and the regulatory environment to be able to reduce barriers to do that. So there's just some examples from Belfast and what we're doing.
Thanks so much, Deirdre. We have time, I think, for one more question that's just come into the chat. Again, any of our speakers can feel free to jump in and answer this one. We've got a question that asks, how do we translate the wider benefits to potential innovators who might be worried about the risk of entrepreneurship and innovation?
Well, I think I already noticed two earlier questions as well. I can imagine that these stories, they resonate for medium-sized or bigger cities, especially smaller cities and communities, because Belfast is not only the city of Belfast, but also its surrounding municipalities, that we always look at the local level to what is your interregional connection with your neighbors. And if you're too small, and you have to do this on your own, it can be quite an endeavor. So if you would ask us to look into a small city, what are the opportunities, then we will do a kind of a regional mapping and to see what are the correlations, what is already binding us, maybe in infrastructure, maybe in the economy. So that is the first answer. And that also helps you to scale down and scale up these kind of concepts in a feasible and also practical way. So it is not exclusively only for the bigger cities. That's for first. And the second one was on AI, and I fully agree. It's a difficult question. I always say first, if you want to have any kind of vision on that, you have to make sure that you are on par in your own organization. So if you know your way, if your organization already using these tools, it makes it easier to understand the needs of potential economic partners or businesses that could thrive on this. So we also do this kind of introductory workshops from BABLE that we can also help your own smaller, bigger government organization to get access and also get acquainted with this tooling before you actually apply it in your, let's say, more economic vision. So that's for the first two questions I noticed. Maybe somebody for the last one that Naomi mentioned.
I kind of get mixed, Naomi. Can you say that again? Then I'll happy to take this one, although we are already 12 now.
Sure, we can. So I know that some of our speakers and maybe even, some of our participants, maybe some of our speakers need to drop exactly in the hour. I realize that we're on time, but if you're able to stay on for another 2 or 3 minutes, we can answer a final question. And then I'm also just happy to take 1 more minute to wrap up. So Thomas, do you have any response to the question, how do we translate the wider benefits to potential innovators who might be worried about the risk of entrepreneurship and innovation? So feel free to share any final thoughts on that question or any of the other questions that have been addressed.
Hey, if I understand the question right, I think that's actually a crucial challenge because there's always kind of the public value perspective and then the individual private value perspective, or if you're from a company or even if you're in a whatever administrative role and you change things, you actually take a personal risk because it might bring up a lot of transaction costs. But I think that's a cultural thing that might work here on the one hand, especially within institutions, to appreciate changes that people make, to support speaking up and also give resources actually to evolve things. On the, let's say, private sector, private economy side, I mean, again, there's 2 ways of answers. You can incentivize with public money somehow, make the risk a bit lower. Also, as we try to do a lot, for example, as well, connect and inspire to see what might be potentials. But then on the other hand, it's also all a system. So I think there's also some forerunners who might go first and enlighten the future for the others, and others might follow. And I think it's also from a, let's say, ecosystem perspective important to know who can kind of set the paths that others can follow, and maybe also focus a bit on them, and then not treat everybody the same way, but that there's a certain size of companies, I think, which is more has better preconditions for innovation than others. So a lot of really small companies, 20 people or so, check in the moment what they can do with AI with us. But very few of them then actually go into a bigger project, which is quite logic because it's a high investment, and it's higher for a small company compared to one which has maybe 200 employees. So that's what I meant with also maybe being a bit strategic and having different roles in an ecosystem.
Thanks for sharing your insights, Thomas. Seeing that we are on time, I am going to go ahead and wrap us up. And just a quick word to our participants, we're happy to facilitate any contact with our speakers if you do have additional questions. We'll also share a recording of the webinar together with the slides. So if you do have any additional questions and we couldn't answer them today in the time allotted, then you'll definitely still have the chance to get those answered. I wanted to say to everybody, thank you very much for joining today. Thank you for our speakers for taking the time to share their insights. And please do go ahead and contact us for support with making your vision for an innovative economy into reality. If you feel inspired by what you have heard today, if you would like support, guidance, advice about turning your city or your region into an innovative economy. So just to give you a very brief overview of some of the support that BABLE has done to local authorities across Europe around this topic. We worked, for example, with Belfast, closely with Deirdre, with the with the development of an implementation roadmap for a smart district and digital innovation ecosystem. We have also supported in Ireland the Southern Regional Assembly with a report on a regional approach to smart specialization. So we've worked quite closely with a number of institutions and councils across Ireland with working with principles of smart specialization, recommending, for example, priority areas, working on defining and identifying those regional areas of strength. We've also worked closely in Germany, so we are working currently closely together with Baden Campus to further innovation in the region, and we've worked together with a number of German cities, such as Bielefeld, such as Leipzig, with creating their own innovation strategies. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today, and you can expect to hear from us within the next day or so with both the links and the access to the slides.